A cannonball whistled past his head. The smell of gunpowder. The screams of dying men. And somewhere in that chaos, a skinny 24-year-old officer stood frozen. Not from fear. From calculation. Because Napoleon Bonaparte wasn't just fighting a battle that day in Toulon. He was fighting against everything the world had decided he could never be. Poor. Foreign. Short. Insignificant. But within 15 years, this same man would stand in a cathedral, snatch a crown from the Pope's hands, and place it on his own head. Half of Europe would kneel before him. Kings would tremble at the mention of his name. And the world would ask one question that still haunts historians today. How? How does a boy with nothing become the man who had everything? This is not a story about war. This is a story about hunger. August 15th, 1769. The island of Corsica. A child is born into a family that is noble only in name. The Bonapartes have a title. Yes. But titles don't fill stomachs. Napoleon's father, Carlo, spends his days chasing political favors. His mother, Letizia, raises 8 children in a house that barely holds together. Corsica itself is a wound, freshly conquered by France. Bleeding, angry, and young Napoleon? He grows up speaking Italian, not French. He grows up hating the French, actually, because to him, they are invaders. Imagine that. The future emperor of France despised France. But his father sees an opportunity, a military scholarship, a chance to send Napoleon to the French military academy at Brienne. At age 9, Napoleon leaves his island, leaves his language, leaves everything familiar, and steps into a world that will mock him every single day. The French boys at Brienne don't see a future emperor. They see a short, awkward kid with a thick accent who can barely speak their language. They call him the Corsican. They laugh at his clothes, his poverty, his otherness. Napoleon doesn't fight back with fists. He fights back with silence, with books, with obsession. While other boys play, he studies. Artillery, mathematics, history, Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar. Men who rewrote the rules. He memorized every battle they fought, every strategy they used. Because Napoleon understands something at 15 that most people never understand in a lifetime. Knowledge isn't just power. It's a weapon. And he's building an arsenal. But here's what terrifies people about this part of his story. He wasn't naturally brilliant. He wasn't even naturally charming. What he had was something darker. Something more dangerous. Pure, unbreakable will. Napoleon graduates from the military academy. He's 16 years old. An artillery officer. Lowest rank. Lowest pay. And his father dies. Suddenly, Napoleon isn't just poor. He's responsible. 8 siblings. A mother. Debts. He takes assignments no one wants. Reads every manual twice. Writes revolutionary ideas about artillery tactics that his superiors ignore. Because who is he? Nobody. For 8 years, Napoleon remains nobody. Stuck. Overlooked. Drowning in mediocrity. And then, 1793 happens. The French Revolution explodes into chaos. King Louis XVI loses his head. Literally. France tears itself apart. Royalists versus revolutionaries. Region versus region. And in the port city of Toulon, British and Spanish forces seize control, threatening to choke the revolution before it can breathe. The French Republic is desperate. They need Toulon back. They need a miracle. What they get is a 24-year-old captain named Napoleon Bonaparte. Picture this scene. December rain. Muddy trenches. Cannons bogged down in confusion. The siege of Toulon is a disaster. French forces are disorganized, demoralized. Napoleon arrives and sees what everyone else missed. It's not about the city. It's about the forts. There's a position, Fort Mulgrave, that overlooks the harbor. Whoever controls that fort controls the ships. Whoever controls the ships controls Toulon. Simple. Obvious. Except no one saw it. Napoleon draws up a plan. Positions his artillery with mathematical precision. Doesn't sleep for 3 days. And when the attack comes, It's not a battle. It's a masterpiece. The fort falls. The British fleet panics. They evacuate. Toulon is retaken. And overnight, Captain Bonaparte becomes a name. Not famous yet, but visible. Promotion to Brigadier General. Age 24. The door cracks open. But here's the thing about doors. They can slam shut just as quickly. Within months, political winds shift. Napoleon's patron falls from power. Gets executed, actually. And Napoleon? Arrested. Accused of treason. He spends 10 days in a cell, convinced he'll face the guillotine. 10 days where everything nearly ends before it begins. But he's released. Barely. No charges. No explanation. Just back to the streets of Paris. Unemployed. Broke. Angry. He wanders the city like a ghost. This is the part of the story people forget. The part where Napoleon Bonaparte almost becomes a footnote. Almost. October 5th, 1795. Royalist rebels rise up in Paris. Thousands of them, armed, marching on the government. The revolution is about to eat itself. Paul Barras, a politician desperate to survive, remembers the artillery officer from Toulon. He finds Napoleon and asks one question. Can you stop them? Napoleon's answer is ice cold, give me command. And give me cannons. He gets both. What happens next is called the whiff of grapeshot. Napoleon positions his guns at key intersections. Waits until the mob is close enough to see their faces. Then fires. Grapeshot, hundreds of metal balls, rip through the crowd. It's not a battle. It's a message. The rebellion collapses in blood and smoke. And Napoleon? He just saved the Republic. Overnight, he's a hero. A guardian. Promoted to commander of the Army of the Interior. At 26 years old, he's suddenly one of the most powerful military men in France. But power is a strange drug. Once you taste it, hunger becomes insatiable. March 1796. Napoleon is given command of the Army of Italy. It sounds impressive. It's not. The Army of Italy is a joke. Starving soldiers. No boots. No supplies. Barely any hope. Napoleon arrives and sees faces that expect nothing. He doesn't give them speeches about glory. He gives them something simpler. A promise. Follow me, and I will lead you into the most fertile plains in the world. Rich provinces, great cities, all will be yours. Italy. Wealth. Plunder. Suddenly, soldiers who couldn't march yesterday are ready to cross the Alps tomorrow. And Napoleon does something brilliant. He moves fast. Faster than anyone thought possible. He divides the Austrian and Piedmontese armies before they can unite. Wins battle after battle, Montenot, Lodi, Arcole, Rivoli. Not because he has more men. Because he has better ideas. Speed. Surprise. Concentration of force. He doesn't fight the way generals are supposed to fight. He rewrites the rules in real time. And the Italian campaign? It becomes legendary. Napoleon returns to Paris not as a general, as a conqueror. Women throw flowers. Crowds chant his name. He's 28 years old. And the government is starting to get very, very nervous. Because here's the problem. Napoleon is too popular, too successful, too dangerous to keep around. So they do what terrified politicians always do. They send him far away. Egypt. The official reason? Cut off Britain's route to India. The real reason? Get him out of France before he gets ideas. Napoleon sails to Egypt with 35,000 men and a fleet of scholars, scientists, artists. Because this isn't just invasion. It's theater. He wants to be Alexander. Caesar. A name carved into eternity. He wins the Battle of the Pyramids. Enters Cairo in triumph. But then reality strikes. British Admiral Horatio Nelson destroys the French fleet at the Battle of the Nile. Napoleon is trapped. Cut off. Stranded in the desert with an army that's starting to die from disease and heat. He tries to invade Syria. Fails. The plague breaks out. Everything is falling apart. And this is where most men would break. But Napoleon does something insane. He abandons his army, sneaks back to France in secret, leaving his soldiers to rot in Egypt. It should destroy him. It should end his career. But when he lands in France, the government is in chaos. Corruption, weakness, collapse, and people are desperate for someone strong. November 9th, 1799. Napoleon walks into the Council of 500, the legislative body of France, with soldiers at his back. It's a coup, a gamble. If it works, he controls France. If it fails, he's dead. Inside the chamber, deputies shout, accuse, resist. Napoleon's brother Lucien, president of the council, buys him time. Soldiers march in. Bayonets glint. And just like that, the French Republic dies. Napoleon becomes first consul. Officially, he's one of three. Realistically, he's the only one that matters. At 30 years old, Napoleon Bonaparte controls France. But control isn't enough. He doesn't just rule. He rebuilds, creates the Napoleonic Code, laws that still influence half the world today, reforms education, stabilizes currency, builds roads, bridges, monuments. France, which was tearing itself apart, suddenly works. And people notice. He makes peace with the Catholic Church, ends internal rebellions, crushes external enemies. Austria, defeated. Russia, pushed back. Britain, isolated. By 1804, Napoleon isn't just popular. He's inevitable. And on December 2nd, 1804, inside Notre Dame Cathedral, history witnesses something unthinkable. Pope Pius VII is there to crown Napoleon as emperor. But when the moment comes, Napoleon doesn't kneel. He takes the crown from the Pope's hands and places it on his own head. The message is clear. No one gives me power. I take it. For the next 10 years, Napoleon dominates Europe like no one since Rome. He defeats Austria at Austerlitz, his greatest battle, crushes Prussia at Jena, forces Russia into alliance at Tilsit. At one point, Napoleon controls France, Italy, Spain, the Netherlands, parts of Germany, Poland. Kings are his puppets. His brothers wear crowns across Europe. He's not just an emperor. He's the emperor, the one every other ruler fears. But here's the terrible truth about empires. They're built on motion. The moment you stop expanding, you start collapsing. Napoleon makes the decision that will destroy him. He invades Russia. Not because he has to, because he can't stop. 600,000 men march into the largest country on earth. It's the biggest army ever assembled. And it walks into a trap. The Russians don't fight. They retreat, burn their own cities, destroy their own supplies. Napoleon reaches Moscow. It's empty and burning. He waits for surrender. It never comes. Winter arrives, and 600,000 men begin the long march back. Frostbite, starvation, Cossack raids. The Grand Army disintegrates. Fewer than 100,000 make it out alive. Napoleon's aura of invincibility dies in the Russian snow. Europe smells blood. Austria, Prussia, Russia, Sweden, they all turn on him. Napoleon fights brilliantly, desperately, wins battles he shouldn't win. But there are too many enemies, too few soldiers. Paris falls. April 1814. Napoleon abdicates. His exile to Elba, a tiny island off the coast of Italy. The man who ruled half the world is now governor of nothing. And everyone thinks it's over. But it's not. February 1815. Napoleon escapes. Lands in France with 1,000 men. The king sends an army to stop him. Napoleon walks toward them. Alone. Opens his coat. Soldiers of the 5th. If any of you wish to kill your emperor, here I am. They don't shoot. They cheer. Within days, regiments defect. Generals switch sides. Napoleon marches into Paris without firing a shot. The king flees. And for 100 days, Napoleon is emperor again. It's called the 100 Days. And it ends at a place called Waterloo. June 18th, 1815. Belgium. Rain-soaked fields. Napoleon faces the Duke of Wellington and a coalition army. It's close. Brutal. All day, the outcome hangs by a thread. But then the Prussians arrive. Fresh troops. Thousands of them. Napoleon's flank collapses. The Imperial Guard, his best soldiers, breaks. For the first time in his life, Napoleon runs. 4 days later, he surrenders to the British. This time, they don't take chances. They send him to St. Helena, a rock in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. No escape. No return. 6 years. Napoleon spends 6 years on that island, dictating memoirs, arguing with his captors, slowly dying. May 5, 1821. Napoleon Bonaparte dies at age 51. Probably from stomach cancer. Possibly from poison. No one knows for sure. What we do know is this. The boy from Corsica who had nothing became the man who had everything. And lost it all. Not because he wasn't brilliant, but because brilliance without limits is just another word for destruction. Here's what they don't tell you in history books. Napoleon didn't conquer Europe because he was the best general. He conquered it because he understood something everyone else missed. The world doesn't belong to the strongest. It belongs to the hungriest. To those willing to risk everything when others hesitate. To those who see a closed door and kick it down. But hunger, unchecked, becomes madness. And madness always ends the same way. In ruins. Napoleon once said, "Impossible is a word found only in the dictionary of fools." He proved it. He rose from nothing, crowned himself emperor, rewrote the maps of Europe. But he also proved something else. That even emperors are mortal. That even legends fall. And that the same fire that lifts you up will eventually burn you down. So when you hear the name Napoleon Bonaparte, don't just think of battles and crowns. Think of the skinny kid at military school who refused to stay small. Think of the man who grabbed the crown because no one else would give it to him. And think of the emperor dying alone on a rock in the ocean, staring at the sky, wondering if it was all worth it. Because maybe the greatest mystery isn't how he rose. It's whether he ever truly understood the cost.